Hey there, my friends. The waterfront real estate in the city of Cape Coral, Florida has been on fire so far this year, specifically the Gulf access homes, so the homes that are on saltwater canals with boating access out to the Gulf. The Gulf access home market has been very, very active in 2026 so far, and I've been meaning to do a video like this for a couple of months. I'm going to do a really deep dive on the statistics specifically involving the Gulf access real estate here in the city of Cape Coral. So if you're thinking about buying a Gulf access home for sale in Cape Coral, or maybe you're thinking about selling a Gulf access home that you own here in the city of Cape Coral, you're going to make sure to catch everything in this video. There's going to be really a lot of great information. If you watch this entire thing, you're going to be way ahead of the game when it comes to knowing the market on Gulf access homes in the city of Cape Coral. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Dustin Guthrie. I'm a 20-year full-time real estate broker right here in Cape Coral in Southwest Florida. I live right here in the Cape, and I do a video on this channel every single week. Today we're covering some really important statistical information, but other times we're just covering some really useful information. Last week I talked about a couple of the new parks that the city of Cape Coral opened up. So if you're interested in Southwest Florida and Cape Coral, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Make sure you turn those notifications on so you can be around for these videos every week. I promise you're going to get a lot of great information, and also my contact information is right there if you are buying or selling a property anywhere in Southwest Florida. Would love to hear from you. I always enjoy speaking to the folks that watch these videos, and I appreciate your time and appreciate you being here. So let's dive right into this. We're going to start, I do a statistical video every single month on the overall Cape Coral real estate market, and we touch on Gulf access homes, but I usually don't get this granular with it. So we're going to be giving you some really specific information on what the Gulf access home market is doing right now, as well as where I see it going in the near future. But let's start off and talk about the total number of sales that we've had so far for Gulf access homes in the city of Cape Coral. All right, so let's start off with the total number of sales that we've seen so far this year. Again, 2026 has been blowing 2025 out of the water, and 2025 really wasn't a bad year for Gulf access homes. We still sold a fair amount of them, but demand has increased so much this year. And as I'm about to show you on these charts, here's a chart. These are the total number of monthly sales for Gulf access homes going back to January of last year, January of 2025. And the Gulf access home market is very much active in the first 6 months of the year, and then it usually slows down in the summer and the fall. As you can imagine, the Gulf access real estate here in the city of Cape Coral is heavily favored by our seasonal residents, either the retirees that are coming down here and either moving here permanently, or the folks that are just down here during the winter months when it's nice and great out and not so hot like it is right now here in Southwest Florida. So, but this year it's been incredibly strong for the summer so far, and this chart shows you up to July of 2026, July of this year. We don't have August numbers yet, but I will be putting those out in the first part of September when they come out. Had 111 Gulf access home sales in the month of July, and that's really unheard of. That's the highest July on record since 2020, when everything was going crazy down here during the pandemic, and we had this huge explosion in the real estate market as folks were coming down here and snatching up this real estate in Southwest Florida. But just to give you some context, I mean, last July, in July of 2025, we only sold 71 of these homes. So we've sold 40 more properties in July of this year versus July of last year. And you can kind of see the trend on this chart. I mean, it's gradually but very steadily been increasing since January of last year. We've had some spikes up and down, but if you want to look at the total number of sales so far this year, there's been 759 Gulf access home sales in the city of Cape Coral so far this year, and that includes August numbers. So we'll add to that by the end of August, certainly. But want to compare that to last year, it's an increase in overall demand for Gulf access real estate in the city of Cape Coral of 29.2% just in 1 year. So we're selling 29.2% more Gulf access homes this year than we did in 2025 up to this point. And there's 122 Gulf access homes that are pending right now. So this is not slowing down like we usually see in the summertime. Usually we see these numbers drop way off in the summer, but the Gulf access demand has remained very consistent. And in fact, we're putting up the same numbers that we were in spring, which is usually the high point for this type of real estate in the city of Cape Coral. So I think that's incredible. Demand's up 29.2%. Let me give you some additional figures. We've got the city of Cape Coral is divided into 4 quadrants. So we have the northeast, the northwest, the southwest, the southeast. And the only quadrants that have Gulf access real estate are the southeast, the southwest, and the northwest. There's plenty of waterfront real estate in the Northeast, but none of those canals are actually Gulf access. So let me just break down some of these numbers. Again, 759 sales so far this year, and they're almost equal. They are, in fact, equal. 324 apiece were in the Southeast and the Southwest. That represents 42.7% each in the Southeast and the Southwest. And in the Northwest quadrant, we've sold 106, which is only 14%. But that makes sense. There's just a smaller number of Gulf access homes up there, especially as the development continues to push into those northwestern neighborhoods. We don't see as many sales down there as we do in the Southeast and the Southwest when there's a ton of existing Gulf access homes. So that's pretty interesting. I want to tell you, I think one of the reasons that we're seeing so many of these sales is because such a big portion of these Gulf access home sales are cash purchases. You know, overall, the non-Gulf access homes, if you go to off-water or even freshwater homes and things like that, we really only see about 21.6% of the transactions are paid in cash. Everyone else is usually getting a mortgage. Occasionally, some people are doing seller finance or something like that. They're doing something other than cash, and cash homes only represent about a fifth of the market. In Gulf access homes, of those 759 sales so far this year, 359 of them were cash transactions. That's 47.3%. Almost half of the market are cash sales. And I think that's one of the reasons that this category is kind of pushed ahead of the other categories. We're in this big turnaround right now. We've had pricing and everything kind of peaked out in 2022 from that crazy run up after the pandemic. And we've been correcting, but we've kind of leveled off. Overall as a real estate market, but Gulf access is ahead of that curve and already kind of starting up in the other direction, as we're going to get to here in a second when we look at pricing. But I think Gulf access is in front of everything else simply because there are so many of those cash transactions. You know, interest rates remain high. They're in the high 6% right now. So if you're getting a mortgage, your purchasing power isn't necessarily what it was back when interest rates were maybe 5%, 5.5%, or even before that when they got down to like 3%, which was crazy. And believe me, we're never going to see that again, hopefully, because if we do, there's some crisis going on. But nevertheless, those high interest rates are kind of keeping the market from really taking off like it otherwise probably would right now. And I think the cash sales are just out there right now because, you know, the equities markets and folks' retirement accounts and everything like that are still doing generally very well right now. And so folks have that extra spending money to come down here and they're purchasing these Gulf access homes. And like I said, the demographic that usually buys these homes are the older generations. They're retired. They've been saving money for a long, long time. Maybe they're selling a property in another area of the country where the real estate market is still doing very well. And they're coming down here and they're buying with cash. And almost half of them are. So that's pretty incredible. And I think that's one of the main driving factors why we're seeing so many more of these sales right now versus some of the other categories in the Cape Coral real estate market. You want to break this down further. Again, 759 total Gulf access home sales so far this year. 45% of those were direct access. And when I say direct access, some people call it sailboat access. That's on a canal where you hop in your boat behind your house and you don't have to go underneath any bridges to get out to open water. They call it sailboat access because obviously you have a big mast on a sailboat and you can't really get those big masts underneath bridges. Our bridges are anywhere from 8 to maybe 11.5 feet in the city of Cape Coral. So the direct access is usually a little bit more in demand. It's usually priced a little bit higher. It's more of a premium just because you have that type of access where you're really not as hindered in terms of the size of boat that you can have behind your house. Obviously, if you've got to get under a bridge and you've got a great big tower on your boat or something like that, you're going to need to buy something with direct access versus indirect access. But 45% of these 759 sales were direct access. That means 55% were indirect access, meaning you had to go under one or more bridges to get out. But like I said, I mean, 759 sales so far this year. Demand overall from 2025 to 2026 is up almost 30%. And that's really one of the reasons that I've said the Gulf access home market has bottomed out, and we are coming up the other direction now. That just the activity has been so much, and the inventory, as we're going to get into in a minute, has come down so much that it's just basic economics. We're going to see these prices start to trickle up, and we already kind of have. And so The next thing I kind of want to talk about is the overall median price. So let's get into those pricing, because again, we are up a little bit from where we were last year. So let's take a look at the median price for these 759 sales. All right, so we talked about the demand being up almost 30% this year for Gulf Access homes versus last year in 2025 at this point. And so what's that meaning for pricing? Well, I'm going to show you a few different metrics. Usually we just look at the median price, but I got a few different ones that I'd like to show you on this one. So this first chart is the median price. I do the median price just because it's a better metric than the average, as you can imagine, especially when we don't have a huge sample size like Gulf Access. If we're only selling 70 or so properties, although we sold 111 last month. If we have a smaller sample size, if I use the average, there might be $4 million sales some months, and that's going to skew those numbers. So the median is the best way to look at it. And if you're not familiar, the median just means if you lined every sale up from the cheapest to the most expensive, the one right in the middle is the median price, and that's really the metric that we use to kind of gauge what the market is doing. But here's the monthly median prices. Again, this goes back to January 2025. I have included August so far. Obviously, we're going to get a lot more sales here towards the end of August, and so this may fluctuate a little bit. But this does go through August of this year. And August, so far this year, the median price was $714,500, and that's been remarkably consistent over the last few months. It was $715 in July and $720 in June. And like I said, when you don't have a big sample size, that's why you're seeing these numbers kind of fluctuate from month to month. You get a few more expensive sales one month, and that median price is going to be up tremendously higher than it would be in a month where maybe you didn't sell as many. So you kind of have to take this thing broadly and almost kind of look at 6 or 8 month chunks to really determine what the market is doing. And so that's kind of what I want to do. If you take the whole year so far, from January 1st all the way up to right now, it's August 24th when I'm recording this. If you take all of those, again, we talked about the total number of sales so far this year was 759. The median price for the total number of Gulf Access home sales so far this year is actually 735. It's actually above where the median price in August is so far. 735,000 of those 759 sales. And just to give that some context, so last year from January to August of 2025, if you took all of those sales and lined them up, that median price was $710,000. So we're $25,000 above where we were at this point last year. That represents about a 3.5% increase. This is the only category that we have so far in the city of Cape Coral where we've seen a demonstrable increase in the overall sale values. The sale prices are actually up 3.5% this year compared to what they were last year, and I think that's pretty telling. And I think that has everything to do with the demand being up again 29.2% and the inventory being down by, well, you're going to see here in a minute, but the inventory is down by about half of what it was in spring of last year when everything kind of peaked out. But let's just look at some of the other details here. Again, we've got Gulf Access real estate in 3 of the 4 quadrants of Cape Coral: the southeast, the southwest, and the northwest. The median price so far this year for Gulf Access homes in the southeast, $625,000, so considerably less. Almost, in fact, a little bit more than $100,000 less than the overall median price. In the southeast, $625,000. In the southwest, we jump up quite a bit. $799,500 is the median price for the southwest locations. And then you go to the northwest, and it's $857,000. Now, why is that? Well, there's a few different reasons. Number one, the southeast is the least expensive quadrant simply because, well, there's a couple reasons, but mainly because the homes there, the southeast in the city of Cape Coral was the first area to be developed starting back in the late 50s and early 60s. And as a result, that kind of development expanded out from the southeast. So we see a lot more older homes, especially the Gulf Access homes, a lot more older homes in the southeast versus the southwest and the northwest. And as a result, you're just naturally going to see prices be a little bit lower there. The other reason is, the southeast, if you look at it on the map, where you get out by boat is a little bit further upriver, and of course the closer you get to the Gulf, usually the more expensive the property is, and the southeast is just a little bit farther away in terms of the overall drive that you have to make via boat to get out to the open Gulf. just a little bit farther away than maybe the Southwest would be. So that's why we see those values a little bit lower. The Southwest is probably, if you really took a look at it and compared identical properties in the Southeast, Southwest, or Northwest, the Southwest is probably going to be the most expensive. We do have a few older homes in there, but they're newer, generally speaking, than the Southeast. Southeast, you're seeing a lot of 60s and 70s and 80s homes. You get over to the Southwest and you see a lot more 1990s, 2000s, things like that. And so usually, like I said, you've had the identical property in the Southeast or the Southwest. The Southwest is going to be more expensive, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you're getting out in the Southwest canals, you're just a little bit closer to the open Gulf. But why is the Northwest the most expensive? Well, it's not because that the areas are more desirable necessarily, at least not yet, versus the Southeast and the Southwest. But the Northwest, really the majority of the development didn't start occurring in the Northwest until the last few years. We had homes up here, and you can still find, I live in the Northwest. I love it up here. My wife and I just bought a Gulf Access house that we're moving to in about less than a month now. Wow. Yeah, the next one of these, probably by October, our market videos are going to be out by the dock, sitting in the tiki hut on the water. So I can't wait to do that. But the North, we love the Northwest. It's just, we moved here 16 years ago. It was vastly less population back then. You would see some 1980s, maybe 1990s homes here or there, but by and large, there was a lot of vacant land. You can see behind me, there's still a lot of vacant land up here. But this area has just really exploded in the last really 6 years, since 2020. And so as a result, especially with the Gulf Access homes, it's just a lot newer properties in the Northwest, and a lot of them are very, very nice new properties. And as a result, that's why you're seeing the median price be higher, because there's considerably more sales, at least percentage-wise, in the Northwest. In fact, 45% of the sales for Gulf Access homes in the northwestern location in Cape Coral have been 6 years or newer. So they were built since 2020 or newer, nearly half the market. And that's why you're seeing $857,000 is the median price for the Northwest. So it's not necessarily that the Northwest is a better location than the Southwest or the Southeast. You're just seeing a lot more newer properties sell. And you can still find some really good deals in the Northwest. There's a ton of development going on up here. There's the Seven Islands project. I just covered the Tropicana Park that just opened up a couple of months ago. Just did that video on that last month. And there's a lot going on up here. So I really think the Northwest is going to look an awful lot like the really desirable locations in the Southwest here in another 10 or so years, maybe less than that, as some of these developments continue to grow and expand. But that's the median prices for the quadrant. If you want to talk about, again, going back to the entire city, we've got direct access and we've got indirect access. As I mentioned previously, the direct Gulf access, the access where you can get in your boat behind your house and you don't have to go underneath any bridges, so you don't have any height restrictions, those direct access properties are always going to carry a little bit of a premium when it comes to price versus the homes where you do have to go under an 8 or an 11-foot bridge to get out to open water. And that's pretty demonstrable here. I mean, the direct access homes that have sold so far this year, the median price for those was $770,000. And if you want to look at the indirect access, $697,000. So the direct access, if you take the same property on a direct access versus an indirect access, it's going to average out to about 10.5% more in terms of the price for a direct access property versus an indirect access property. And obviously there's a lot of factors there as well. A huge amount of the value for Gulf Access homes depends on how far away from the canal exit that you are. So there's some locations, especially like in the Southwest or the Northwest, where you can be an hour or more away from open water, that you have to go through the canals an hour or more to get out to that open water. And obviously those properties are going to be a fair amount less when it comes to values than a property that's, say, 5 minutes from open water. So there's a lot of factors that go into that, but about 10.5% on average more for a direct access home versus an indirect access. And like I mentioned, when we were just talking about the Northwest and how 45% of those sales were 6 years or newer properties, if you look at the new construction that's happened so far this year in the city of Cape Coral for Gulf Access homes, the homes that have sold that are 6 years or younger, basically anything that's been built since 2020, The median price for those is $1.15 million. So we're well north of $1 million for those new construction or newer construction golf access homes. And if you look at homes that are 25 years or older in the city of Cape Coral for golf access homes, that drops down to $625,000. You know, it's almost half of what a new construction property is, at least when we're talking about the median price. And you know, that sweet spot again is going to be right around that median price of the maybe high sixes, low sevens. That's where you're going to find a lot of the sales. But we really haven't seen too many sales in the extreme low end of the market. When I say the extreme low end of the market, it's generally speaking, it's under $500,000, but there's been a few sales under $400,000 this year, but not many. There's only been 19 golf access home sales that have occurred in the entire city this year that sold under $400,000, and the very lowest one was right at $300,000. So that's kind of the baseline of what you're finding. Usually properties in those price range are old properties, maybe built in the 60s or 70s. Maybe they're pretty small, 12 or 13 or 1,400 square feet, probably don't have pool. That's where you're finding those properties that are maybe in the 300s. You want to get into the golf access pool homes, and those are going to usually be at or above $500,000. But we've had some big sales as well. Over $1 million so far this year. We've sold 186 golf access homes over $1 million so far this year, and there's been 29 sales over $2 million. The highest of which was $4.2 million that I covered a couple of months ago on the market report. That was in the Hermitage, which is a beautiful, beautiful smaller community down there by Cape Harbor. So we're seeing a lot of movement in the higher end of the market, and that's kind of what I want to talk about next, which is the overall volume of golf access home sales. In other words, of those 759 sales that we saw this year, if you take all of the sale prices of all of those 759 properties, what is the total? What is the market? What is being spent in this market for golf access homes so far this year? And that's the chart I'm going to show you next. This is the monthly total sales volume for all of the homes that have sold in any given month going back to January of 2025. And I think it's even a little bit clearer in this chart than it is in the overall median price in terms of the trends that we've been seeing over the course of the last year. You know, this past month, again, this chart goes from January 25 to July of 2026 because we don't have the full picture of what August is going to look like just yet. But July of this year, again, those 111 sales, you take all of the sale prices of those 111 sales that happened last month, it adds up to $92.3 million being spent in the city of Cape Coral last month just on golf access homes. And that's been remarkably consistent for the last 6 months, basically. We've had the last, the 6 out of 7 months so far. The only exception is January, but the other remaining 6 months, so February, March, April, May, June, and July, the monthly total volume has been over $88 million. To put that in perspective, there were only 3 months total last year in 2025 that got over 80. And just a couple, and I think April was right at $80 million, but there was only 3 months last year. 6 out of 7 months so far this year have been over $88 million, and a couple of them have breached $90 million. So there's been a tremendous amount of activity, and if you just want to if you just kind of want to compare July of this year to July of last year, again, $92.3 million spent on golf access homes in the month of July 2026. July of 2025, there was only $53.75 million spent last year in the month of July. But what does that mean? Because we just got through talking about the total number of sales being up 29.2%. Well, if you take the total volume in the first 7 months of this year, it totals out to $615.56 million. To put that in perspective, the first 7 months of last year, so from January to July of 2025, there were 29.2% fewer homes sold, but there was $464.37 million spent last year. So we've spent so far this year $151.2 million more on golf access real estate this year, golf access homes, single family homes this year versus last year. So even though we sold 29.2% more individual properties so far this year, we've spent 32.6% more dollars on golf access real estate this year versus last year. And I think part of that is you're seeing that 3.5% price difference But I think the other part of it is just there's the higher end of the market, the $1 million plus sales that so far this year have been much stronger than they were last year. I think a lot more of the higher the higher end buyers are feeling more comfortable that this market has turned around, that they're getting into the market. And so, yeah, that's why you're seeing the overall volume actually increase more than the overall total number of sales. So I just thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to show that to you. Let's talk about the total number of days that it takes to sell a golf access home right now. So as we'll get into in a minute, the inventory's come down. But I want to show you this chart because this is the monthly. So of all the sales that occurred in each individual month, this is the median days to sell. So in other words, the property goes on the market, it goes pending by X date on average, let's say. So again, this chart is the monthly. It goes back to January 2025. It does go through August because the number may change a little bit by the end of August, but I think it's worth seeing so far. And August so far this year, the median number of days to sell, the median time that it takes to sell a golf access home is at 70. And that's down from July's number of 75. But to put that in perspective once again, and you can kind of see it on this chart, July of last year in 2025, it took an average of 89 days. And it got all the way up to 111 days in, 70 was the, 89 was the month of August last year. 89 days to sell in August of 2025, and July's number was that big spike at 111. So again, I think you have to kind of read between the lines a little bit because these can fluctuate from month to month. So let's just take the total sales that have occurred so far in the year to date, basically January 1st through it's August 24th right now. If you take all those and stack them up and get the median number of days on market, this year so far, the median came out at 57, and if you look at the first 8 or so months of last year, that number was 72. So, gosh, what's that? 15 fewer days to sell now than it was at this time last year, at least on average. And if you go back to 2024, when the market was doing a little bit better, the days on market then were 62. So we're still less than we were in 2024, and in fact you have to go all the way back to 2023 when the market was still doing really, really well. And to get under that 57 number, it was 43 in the first 8 months of 2023. So the days on market are coming down, the total number of sales are going up, the median price is eking up at this point. I think we can safely say that by looking at these numbers. And a lot of that has to do with the inventory. So let's talk about the inventory, or the number of available properties that are on the market right now for golf access homes. All right, so we talked about the demand side of things, the total number of sales right now being up 29.2% from the total number of sales that we saw up to this point last year in 2025. We talked about the pricing, which is now demonstrably up about 3.5% from the numbers that we were seeing in 2025. And let's look at the supply side of things. So we're going to talk about the overall inventory. And so I'm going to show you this chart, the total number of monthly active listings that were on the market. And these numbers that you're about to see, they don't mean that there were this many properties on the market at one time, because obviously it's just the total number of active listings that were on the market at one point or another during that month. So some of these properties sold, some of them expired, some of them were terminated and taken off the market, et cetera, et cetera. It just gives you an overall idea of what the activity looked like for the total number of active listings that were on the market in any given month. So here's the chart. It goes back to January 2025 and ends in July of this year, July 2026, because again, we don't have the total number yet for August. 565 active listings on the market at one point or another in July of this year. But just look at this overall trend since spring of last year. You know, we saw a huge ramp up. Really, inventory was up in 2024, especially by the end of 2024, it had started to go up. And then it really took off as we got into the first few months of 2025, of last year. As we got into January and February of 2025, the inventory had just skyrocketed, and we were up well over 1,000 listings on the market for golf access homes. And it kind of peaked out in April. In April, we hit 1,099 active listings for golf access homes on the market in April of 2025. And then ever since then, it's just been remarkable how quickly the inventory has come off the market. You know, we were selling 29.2% more properties, so that certainly had an effect, and that certainly helped things, but it couldn't make these reductions like this on just that increase in demand alone. I think a lot of the sellers finally figured out as they got into the later months of 2025 that they weren't getting the number that they thought they were going to get. They weren't getting those 2022 numbers, those 2021 numbers. And they said, hey, we're going to take a step back and maybe take our property off the market until the overall market for Gulf access homes comes back. And so I think it was a mix of those two things, the demand going way up, and then finally some sellers getting the understanding that, hey, it's not the market to be asking for these prices right now. Let's take a step back until we can get the numbers that we're looking for. But let's just look at this compared to last year. Again, 565 homes on the market, Gulf access homes on the market in July. If you take that back to July of last year, there were 817, and that was after we had already seen a significant reduction in inventory. But 817 last July, and now we're at 565. And you know, we peaked out in April of last year at 1,099 properties. So from that peak, from when that market peaked on the supply side of things to right now in July, or this past month in July, we've taken a total of 534 properties off the market. That represents 48.6 of the total number of active listings that were available back during that peak. We've basically cut the inventory in half in the last 18 or so months. And it's pretty incredible. As I mentioned, there are not 565 actives on the market right now. In fact, I just took a look at it this morning here on August 24th. There's 406 available properties, Gulf access. If you were actually shopping for a Gulf access home, you have 406 choices right now, which sounds like a lot, but it's really, really not, especially when you're talking about, you know, we sold 111 of these homes this last month in July in the middle of summer when it's normally very slow for Gulf access homes. So the inventory levels that we're at right now, it's the lowest. That the July inventory number was the lowest that we've seen for Gulf access homes since February of 2023, and you know, that was when prices were still up considerably from where they are now. So we're getting back to quote unquote normal, maybe equal levels, and we're getting in some dangerous territory of actually going below that. And I think that's part of the reason that you're seeing the prices start to tick up from where we were at last year, 3.5% just in the last basically from 2025 to 2026. And a lot of that has to do with, again, the increased demand, but at the same time that demand's been increasing, the total number of properties that are available have been going down drastically. And I think all of that makes for a pretty darn good case that this particular market segment for Gulf access homes in the city of Cape Coral has bottomed out at this point, and we are already in an increasing price market. Doesn't mean you can't still get a great deal. Doesn't mean you've missed a window of opportunity if you are buying a property out there. And it certainly doesn't mean that if you're selling a Gulf access home that you can, you know, ask a little bit higher price. I don't think we're quite there yet to where we need to be stacking on top of what the comparable sales say that your property is worth. So you need to still be smart as a seller. You're still in a pretty good position as a buyer because, again, our prices have come down in many cases maybe 15 or more percent, not even including the high inflation years that we've had since those peaks back in 2022. The market for this segment of real estate peaked out in spring of 2022, and then it was kind of flat for a year or so, and then it really didn't start to make big drops until 2024, and certainly last year when the inventory was high. That's when we saw it kind of go down a little bit, but since kind of bottomed out, and I think there's a really good case to be made that we are back to an increasing price market for Gulf access homes. Now, the other segments of the Cape Coral real estate market, the non-waterfront homes, the condos, things like that, those are behind the Gulf access homes, specifically mainly for the reason that I told you, because the Gulf access homes, almost half of them are being bought with cash. Only a fifth of the properties that are non-Gulf access homes are being purchased with cash, so a little over 21%. So most of those buyers are still having to get mortgages, and their purchasing power really isn't what it was a couple of years ago because the interest rates are still reasonably high. In the high sixes right now is what the mortgage rates are. So I think that's why those segments of the market are kind of falling behind the Gulf access, but everything is heading in the right direction. So no matter what you're looking at, I think we can safely say that the market is pretty much about bottomed out. It's certainly bottomed out and then ticked back up in the Gulf access side of things. I think the off-water homes and the condos and things like that. I think they're probably pricing is probably going to be flat for them for a little while, and then we're going to start to see them go back up because the inventory levels for those properties have come down as well, and the demand, at least in a lot of categories, has been up a fair amount this year compared to last year, but nothing like what Golf Access has done so far this year, and it's absolutely been remarkable to watch. The majority of my business is Golf Access real estate. That's kind of my specialty, if you want to call it that, especially here in the city of Cape Coral, although I do sell quite a few Golf Access homes up there in Punta Gorda and Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. My kind of bread and butter is this Golf Access waterfront real estate in the city of Cape Coral, Florida. So if you're looking for something like that, if you're planning on buying in the near future, I really would appreciate it if you reached out. Give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Contact information's right there on the screen. If you're selling a property, I love nothing more than to take Golf Access listings right now, because we can kind of throw our weight around a little bit more, at least compared to what we could, certainly last spring, when the inventory levels were high. But again, you still got to be smart. You still got to price your property right. It still has to look top notch, and all the normal stuff that you got to do as a seller. And if I can help you with that, certainly reach out to me. I would love to give you kind of a free analysis on what your property might sell for, or kind of a rough estimate of what your property would sell for in the current market, and kind of where we would need to price that, as well as give you some tips on maybe what you need to do to get that thing looking top notch. So whether you are planning on selling a Golf Access home or planning on buying or any home for that matter, but especially Golf Access, and especially in the city of Cape Coral, give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email. This is the majority of what I do in my day-to-day career here in Southwest Florida. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got I threw a lot of numbers at you really quick, and I apologize for that, but hopefully you got some really good information. Hopefully you're quite a bit more educated on the state of the Golf Access home market in the city of Cape Coral than you were before you watched this video. And I really appreciate your time. If you would, do me a favor. If you did get something out of it, do me a favor, hit the like button. And again, make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, I got a lot of folks that watch these videos every week that aren't subscribed. It just really helps me out if you hit the subscribe button, turn those notifications on. It just lets YouTube know that people are out there and they're watching the videos and they enjoy them. And it just helps me out a little bit. So if you can do that, I would really appreciate it. Again, call, text, or email me anytime if I can help you. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate and value your time, and I will see you on the next video here in just a few days.
Like and subscribe. Just kidding.